All right. Hey, Sidra. Hey, guys.
Hey everyone.
Start.
Hey guys, Sidra, Yuri.
Hello, hello. Hey,
Hi,
hey.
everyone.
Hello.
Welcome,
All
Ignite
right.
Mentors.
Hi,
Sorry for the
everyone.
technical issues, but we are live and we're here. Thank you to everyone that's joined, and I can't wait for this exciting new chapter of Mentor Hours that we're doing. This is the first time we've had of four mentors on one panel, discussing a niche topic like this. So I'm excited to have you guys on board, and Ignite is happy to host Mentor Hours with you guys, and we look forward to having you mentors as well as the attendees participate actively in our community moving forward.
Perfect.
Happy to do it.
Perfect. We're also excited to start with. Hi, Abhi. Hi, Judy.
Hey,
Shantan.
hey.
Hey,
Hello,
everyone.
hello.
Hey guys.
So I'm just going to share my screen, and can everyone see?
Yeah.
Yep. Mhm.
Cool. Okay, so to everyone here, we are going to be looking through navigating legal territory for international growth. There are a lot of startups, especially in Ignite, where we have startups coming in from different regions, startups looking to grow in the UAE, startups looking to grow outside of the UAE. And so we've decided to put together a panel of experts that'll help navigate the challenges through that. And we're going to look at as well a case study and the different legal aspects that can come into that. So what we have, so the aim here is that we're going to help startup founders essentially be prepared for anything that comes in their way when it comes to the legal aspects of expanding their businesses, right? So the four critical areas that we're going to look at is incorporation, intellectual property, liability protection, and cross-border transactions, right? And then what we aim that every founder here achieves from that is that we have they're prepared legally to establish their business places like the US. They know how to protect IP and contracts. They understand tax implications for cross-border growth, and then they have insights into fundraising and cross-border financial compliance. So just to run through the panel of expert mentors we have with us Abe Wahabi, who's a partner at Taft Steadness. He's going to be talking to us about business entity selection, specifically where in the US you should look to incorporate, comparing, and then you can see the objectives as well, comparing LLC versus corporations, evaluating the best states. We have Shantanu, who's the founder of Ronin Legal. He comes from an intellectual property background, and then he's going to talk us through about registering trademarks, patents, evaluating contracts, and then avoiding legal mistakes to make. We have Sidra Salman, who's the managing partner of SSN CEO, and so she'll be showing us through the tax implications when you're crossing borders, right? Keeping in mind different countries have different tax laws. She's going to help us analyze and understand the tax implications from UAE to US specifically. And then we have lastly Yure from SkipQ. So Ure is going to help us talk through cross-border transactions, fundraising strategies, and then structuring payments in a way that's legally compliant. I'm going to now introduce the case. Abe, if you'd like to help walk us through, introduce the case to us, I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for the introductions. That was really well. So we put together this case study for you that it probably make more sense if we could kind of talk about it applied to a specific scenario. And this scenario seems typical of what we'd expect to see. So I know we're kind of running over on time, but essentially we're following a founder, Alicia, and her company EcoGlow, who's based in Dubai. In her business as she thinks about kind of crossing borders into the US and establishing her business in the US. She's got a number of concerns there that all kind of follow and fit into the topics that we're going to talk about. Specifically, how to structure her business in the US, with the IP and intellectual property protections, and then the tax, and then how to structure her contracts. So then on the first topic, it's so she has a business that's based in the UAE, and now she wants to bring it over to the US. And what does that mean? So in the US, there's a number of different legal structures as to how to organize your business. First is an LLC or a corporation. LLC is essentially a limited liability company, and then the corporation is a corp. So they function similarly, but then there's some distinctions between both that are specific to kind of Alicia and then what she's trying to do. So in LLCs, and Sidra will talk more about the taxation of this, but they're generally considered pass-through. So that the way that they're viewed is that they're essentially kind of an extension of your existing business in the UAE, where then that existing business in the UAE will be the sole member of the LLC. So LLCs, unlike corporations, they don't have stockholders. It's just members. And like I said, it's a little bit less formal of an entity, and it's easier to manage, easier to run. And I know all of this stuff sounds great at a high level, but then when you're thinking about kind of structuring your business, a corporation, at least in Alicia's sense, is a lot better. So unlike an LLC, the corporation has stockholders. So they actually issue stock, and that stock evidences the ownership. It's managed by a board of directors who then delegate down to executive officers. And it's taxed at a corporate level. So that, again, I'm sorry, Sandra, I'm not trying to take away from you, but it will essentially act as a blocker for taxes. So you can kind of house any sort of liabilities, any profit loss at the corporate level instead of having it automatically flow up to the UAE. And that could be attractive for a number of reasons. And it has a lot of it's got a lot more stricter regulations in terms of how it's operated, what decisions require stockholder votes, what decisions require the vote of the board of directors, what decisions require both. Whereas the LLC is just kind of managed by its members or its manager, and they can kind of do whatever they want or make decisions however they want. The difference, the way that I look at the two, is that an LLC is more functionally, essentially just like a business relationship through a contract, as opposed to a corporation, which is a business relationship through the application of law, specifically Delaware law, and through the application of contract as to how those laws are kind of adhered to. So in Alicia's case, she's trying to do two things. Not only bring her business to the US, but also structure it in a way that is better for her from a tax perspective, will be attractive to investors in her operational goals in the US, and then also to kind of deciding what states. So deciding what state that's probably the easiest one. 9 out of 10 companies are all in Delaware. And the reason being is that Delaware has a robust jurisdiction and laws, and everything's kind of in place for how corporations are supposed to be operated. There's a lot of case studies that are done. There's a lot of rules and regulations, which sound scary when you're trying to move over to the US, but to a US attorney, it's more comforting because everything's kind of been laid out. You're not reinventing the wheel. And I think the whole purpose of when you're trying to move your business to the United States is to not reinvent the wheel, right? You want to be creative with how you're growing your business, not with how you're structuring it. And then the reason why you want to select a corp is again, from a tax perspective, it'll act as a blocker. So unless you actually want so in Alicia's case, she doesn't want the funds to flow or any profits, losses, liabilities to flow up to the UAE entity. So keeping it at the corporate level will act as a blocker. But I think what the most important part of organizing as a corp is that every US investor is going to want to invest in a corporation. So if you're going to kind of bifurcate the way that your business is run, right? And you're going to separate the UAE activity from the US activity. Um, any US based investor that's investing in this Delaware corporation is going to want to see it as a corporation. So not only because of the rules, the regulations, and kind of the ideas behind governance, but most importantly, it's for something called qualified small business stock, which is a huge exemption that's only available to corporations, and it's just this huge tax break. So again, every kind of fundraising deal, and I've worked on thousands, every fundraising deal that I've done where the company started off as an LLC, the end result or as a condition to the closing was them converting to a corporation at the time of the closing of the fundraising. So when you're kind of thinking about that too, is that a corporation also is a lot easier with respect to granting incentive equity and how to compensate your employees that are kind of boots on ground in the US. So in Alicia's case, as she expands into the US, she's probably going to have US based employees. She's probably going to have US based operations that she wants to kind of keep separate from the UAE entity. So when you structure as a corporation, you're able to kind of issue options, which you can't do in LLC. You're able to issue other sorts of incentive stock and equity to kind of incentivize. And this is really key for startups because you don't really have the cash to pay big salaries. So you use the equity as an incentive to kind of keep them motivated. And it's just much easier and much more tax efficient and from a US perspective to do it that way. Um, at the end of the day, every business's needs and requirements when moving over are different. And it's really important to consult a US based attorney for what that means, or a UAE based attorney that kind of functions in the US, because if some of these facts were a little bit different, right? If Alicia didn't mind the pass through, or if Alicia just really wanted this US based entity to be an extension of the UAE entity, an LLC might actually make more sense in some of those instances. Or if she says, no, we're just kind of establishing in the US for the purposes of just kind of bringing our product there for regulations, for all of that, then, in those instances, she wants the easier sort of management, the easier sort of structure. So it is very fact specific. It is very case by case specific. But at the end of the day, the goal is to just kind of pick a path that makes sense for you based on how you're growing your business and what you want your business to do in the United States. Also, too, another thing is that if you don't plan on taking investment in the United States, or you have investors that are only interested in investing at the top level in the UAE entity, an LLC might make more sense. So all of these are very fact specific. This is just a very high level overview of the functionalities, the benefits, and the risks of both. But when you kind of get down to the details, which you want to work with your attorney on, it really does matter, like some of those details as to how you want to operate your business and how regulated you need it to be or how strict you want it to be really start to make sense. But essentially, at the end of the day, what you want to do is just pick the path that makes the most sense for you and pick the path that kind of works best based on your situation. So in Alicia's case, we would recommend Delaware Corporation. The sole stockholder will be the UAE Corp, and all of that is based on the facts from the page before. So, yeah.
Wow, that was fast. Are you done, Abe? Man. All right, it looks like Abe's done. That was fast.
Sorry. I was saying I'm happy to keep talking if you like, but I don't want to spill into anybody else's time.
No, I'm just thinking you're a hard act to follow. I don't know how I'm going to get through my stuff at the pace you did, man. Hey guys, whoever's on anyway. My name's Shantanu. I run Ronan Legal, and we're going to be talking about intellectual property issues. So Alicia's got what seems to be an interesting product. Whenever you have something that you created, the fundamental sort of thing you've got to look for is how do you protect it? Because if you can't protect something, you don't own it. Intellectual property protection is the way in which we generally protect what we've come up with in the business world. There's different types of intellectual property protection. The kind that's probably most relevant to Alicia, because she's developed what seems to be a smart sensor, are probably patents, right? Now, patents in general, you can't get patents on software, but I'm assuming Alicia's product is at least in part a tech product. There are certain countries in the world that don't grant you patents on software, but luckily they do grant, for example, the UAE. Other countries do grant you patents on software, like the US, but in Alicia's case, it seems like what she's got hardware, these sensors, which probably have inbuilt software. So that makes it slightly easier for her to patent her tech. Yeah, there are certain fundamental things. Yeah, I mean, actually, let me back up a second. Any kind of intellectual property protection is territorial. So, for example, if you get a patent only protects your idea or your invention from being copied within the particular territory. So, if it's the UAE you have a patent in, no one can steal your idea in the UAE. But hey, guess what? They might steal it in Saudi Arabia, right? Which is why one of the key things to do when you have an invention is to try and get a patent in every country in which you aim to commercialize. Now, this, of course, sounds like a very painful process because you don't want to go, hiring lawyers in different countries and filing the same documentation multiple times and paying fees multiple times, which is why you've got a bunch of these conventions and treaties that make it simpler. They provide for a single point filing. In the world of patents, you've got the Patent Cooperation Treaty. So if you're filing your first patent in a country that's a member of the Patent Cooperation Treaty, then you could probably go ahead and use that filing to get a bunch of filings in other countries as well, provided your invention meets the requirements under the domestic laws of those countries for eligibility for a patent. Right now, of course, the eligibility for a patent is pretty specific. It varies from country to country. Some of the basic requirements is that the invention should be new, it should be non-obvious, and that it should have utility. In any case, these are technical requirements, so Alicia needs to hire a patent attorney, stat. In addition to patents, you've also got copyrights and trademarks, which I think more people are probably familiar with. Copyrights protect creative endeavors, but copyrights can also protect software, which is why we bring it up in this context. Alicia also seems to have an interesting, a vaguely creative trademark, Eco Glow. So she's probably going to want to register that trademark. Now, by way of background, you don't need to register your trademarks and copyright in order to have protection under law, but it sure makes the process of defending them in court much easier, which is why we always recommend to clients that they go ahead and seek registration for the copyrights and trademarks, even though it's not mandatory. Now, again, similar to patents, in the world of trademarks and copyrights, you've got these conventions and treaties that allow you to register in multiple countries based on a filing made in a single origin country. So let's move on to contracts, which is really the fun stuff. Can we get to the next slide, please? Look, you've registered your IP. Now you need to start doing business, right? Now, in Alicia's case, can we get to the next slide, please? Great. So in Alicia's case, she wants to do business in the US. So she's going to have to enter into contracts both to have her products manufactured, unless she's got in-house manufacturing capability to manufacture all of her smart sensors, which is unlikely in this day and age. So she's going to need contracts with people who supply who manufacture and supply her sensors, who we'll call vendors, and also with the people that she's selling her sensors to. Now, she may not be selling direct to consumer. She may be selling through distributors and partners in the US. So those are partnership agreements. In general, before you enter into an agreement, because, legal agreements take time to negotiate, depending on how good your lawyer is. But in general, before you start a conversation with someone about a business relationship, it's always a good idea to sign a non-disclosure agreement. And non-disclosure agreements are important because in order to hammer out a deal on commercials, in principle, it's important. It's going to be necessary for you to disclose proprietary information, and you don't want people, which happens all the time. You don't want people to sort of spend 3 months understanding what your business is all about and who your suppliers are and what your secret sauce is, and then running off and doing the same thing by themselves. Which is why you need to sign a non-disclosure agreement. The fundamental principle of a non-disclosure agreement is that anything you disclose to the other party must be kept secret by the other party, or you can sue them. Now, let's talk about vendor agreements. Vendor agreements are essentially, as I said, the agreements you sign with the guys that manufacture and supply you the product, your product. It's important. There are a few key legal considerations that you want to sort of look at when it comes to vendor agreements. You've got quality and compliance requirements. You've got obviously the commercial stuff, payment terms, pricing structure. Do you get paid? When do you get paid? Where is delivery made? How is the product shipped to you? Who bears the cost of insurance? What happens? And then, of course, you've got liability considerations, right? Now, Alicia is selling her sensors into a highly regulated country that is a litigator's dream. Looking at you, Abe. So the US is a very, very litigious country. You can and will be sued if there are if your consumers or your business partners, if something goes wrong. And so it's very important to have product liability. It's very important for you to be able to pass on any liability that you take from the market onto your manufacturers, at least as far as product liability goes. So typically how you do that in your vendor agreements is by saying that by inserting indemnification clauses where you say that, look, if I get sued for something that is essentially your fault, in the sense that you made a product that was faulty, that has a manufacturing defect, and I got sued as a result, then I'm going to be able to sue you and recover whatever I've paid to whoever sued me, right? And of course you have and then of course you've got quality and compliance requirements, which is where you essentially have an annex, or you have a separate quality agreement. With pharmaceutical products, you generally have a separate quality agreement, but in Alicia's case, you're probably just going to have an annex that lays out the specific quality requirements she has. Governing law, this is always an interesting one in legal agreements. Alicia is obviously based in the UAE, so she's probably going to want to negotiate for English law and courts of ADGM. This is a pretty common combination with UAE-based businesses. English law, both the ADGM and the DIFC in the UAE sort of operate common law legal systems within their little free zones, and the courts essentially operate like English courts. Now, if you're doing a deal with, it depends on where your vendors are based and whether your vendors have more leverage than you. If they have more leverage than you, they may well say that, no, we want the agreements to be governed by the laws of the jurisdiction where we are based. For example, if your vendors are American, they're probably going to want the laws of, say, Delaware, as Abe said earlier, to govern the agreement, and they're probably going to want disputes to be resolved in either under arbitration or in New York courts. So it's, the governing law clause is ultimately a question of leverage. Don't let your lawyers tell you otherwise. It comes down to who's got more leverage. The party that has more leverage will probably get to force the governing law of the jurisdiction they are based in down your throat. Partnership agreement. This is essentially how Alicia gets her products into the market, right? She's probably not going to be selling direct to consumer unless she's already got a massive sort of subsidiary that's operational in the country. So she's going to be using distributors. So she's going to be entering into distribution and supply agreements. There again, the liability clauses, there's a bunch of different considerations in those agreements, but the liability clauses are probably going to be most heavily negotiated. Apart from obviously the commercial terms, pricing, payments, and all of that stuff. What happens to unsold items, what sort of incentives and discounts and so on the distributors can offer to their customers. But liability is a big consideration, and as a supplier, Alicia is probably going to want to limit her liability to the value of the product that she's supplied, that she's given to a partner or to a distributor. Indemnification provision considerations will probably also need to be negotiated pretty thoroughly. The distributor is going to want to pass on liability to Alicia for any product liability claims in the market, right? There will also be considerations of data protection. We don't really have a lot of time to talk about them, but it's important to note that there is no federal data protection law in the US. Even in healthcare, they've got the HIPAA, but the HIPAA only applies to healthcare providers, healthcare service providers. So it only applies to hospitals, clinics, insurance, agents, insurance companies, and so on. So what you're left with is you're left with a patchwork of state-specific laws on data protection. So you've got to be very careful. The most significant of which is the California Consumer Protection Act, which in certain respects is more painful than the GDPR. Again, you're probably going to want to negotiate governing law very closely. In this case, your distributors are in the US, and they're probably going to ask for Delaware or New York law, and they're going to ask for disputes to be governed in the courts of that jurisdiction. These commercial agreements, we'll move on to the next slide, but just one last point: your commercial agreements are extremely important. Don't go with template agreements. Don't pick up something your friends send you. This happens all the time with my clients, especially if you're a startup like Alicia is. These commercial agreements, you may be looking to sign one as quickly as you can because you're just looking to get your product to market. But believe me, if a problem arises, the terms that you did negotiate will come back to make your life hell. Can we move to the next? We have. Okay, great. Another important thing to consider is when you're hiring employees or consultants or anyone else, is to make sure that you've got, I mean, there are a bunch of different considerations, but one important thing is to make sure that you retain ownership of any IP that's created by your employees or consultants. And the way to do that is to have a work for hire clause in your agreements, which explicitly says that anything that your employees or consultants create will be owned by you, will be assigned to you. In an IP-driven business like Alicia's, or indeed any tech business, this sort of thing is very important because you have IP, then that IP is improved upon. You don't want to be in a situation where you have the underlying IP, but the improvements to the IP are owned by someone else. Licensing agreements. Now, in certain cases, when someone owns a certain tech, which they may instead of taking the tech to market themselves, they may wish to just license the tech to someone who's got the wherewithal to manufacture the product in the country and distribute it. In those cases, you don't manufacture the product, you license the technology to someone who does manufacture the product, and then they take the product to market. In those cases, essentially what you're doing is you're entering into a licensing or technology transfer agreement. Those are very, very tricky indeed. There's not enough time to go into all of the intricacies here. But again, Alicia would be well advised to get a lawyer who's skilled in doing licensing agreements if she's having the products manufactured in the country. Right? Dispute resolution we spoke about already. How are we doing for time, guys? Are my 12 minutes up?
We're okay, man. Keep going. No worries.
I can't hear anything. Never mind. Let's just assume my 12 minutes are up. All right. I think so. I hope that was useful. We can always have questions later. I sort of rushed through these slides, but we can always have questions later. Who's up next? Sidra, is it you? Yeah, it's
Hello.
you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Shanta. It was very, very intensive. I mean, I just keep thinking about the complications which Alicia is gonna be in. Thank you very much, guys, for arranging it, putting together. Just before we lost the tempo, which Abby and Shanta has really put it forward, I will just take it forward the conversation. So going forward, the conversation which we are helping the Alicia to understand the level of complications she's gonna be in, and which she has to really took into consideration. Now, after discussion of the legal structure and the IP rights and commercials and legal landscape of the USA, we are into the taxation side, which is definitely the financial outcome, and definitely that will be coming as part of the important conversation. Alicia being set up in UAE and being established her IP and all the exercise of business which she has done in UAE. Now she's going to expand in USA. So we will be discussing about the taxation sides, especially the value added tax, company income tax, withholding tax. So we'll be discussing three taxation impact in terms of different options which she can legally which she can set up in terms of the taxation. So definitely it has to be in agreement with what Abby has told. So it has to be very much in terms of that, so that we can align together. But yes, for the purpose of options, how many options we can put forward in terms of Alicia to have the EcoGlow expanding in USA. We have considered here the maximum options which we can put forward. So next slide, please. So it's a little bit, a bit very, I try to keep the things as simple as possible. We will go one by one the options. So first option which I put together is the holding company. Holding company UAE is definitely, as we all know, that UAE is much easier when it comes to regulations, holding companies, taxations, and the money regulations and the financial securities regulations as well. So definitely there could be one structure where we can have one holding company in UAE. That could be in ADGM or DIFC, whatever jurisdictions we are familiar with. And then the holding company can have a holding in UAE itself and the USA itself. So it will, yes, that next discussion is how it can simplify the requirements of IP rights, registrations, investors onboarding, contracts, how simplify we can have the contracts, and how Alicia can really waive over individual liability by converting it into the holding company. So, but yes, this is one of our most attractive structure at the moment, which we can have, knowing that UAE is having the corporate tax, and this is the first year of the corporate tax. Corporate tax rate in the country currently is 9%, and this is one of the lowest around the globe. So definitely, we are not talking about the minimum effective rate as per the OECD guidelines, but yes, UAE at the moment is among the lowest in the taxation. But yes, we are into the tax regime now, being UAE company. So holding company, if we are having the holding company in UAE, we are going to have the holding company will invest in UAE mainland company and the USA as well. I will just explain here the one thing. In UAE, we have the two distinctions. One is the mainland and other is the free zones. Among free zones, we have other two distinctions: designated zones and the normal free zones. So just for the purpose of clearing up the landscape, that this is what we exist in the UAE. So holding company will invest in UAE and in the USA. UAE company will be subject to its own 9% the corporate tax, and the USA will be 21%. Holding company can be subject to some tax exemptions in the UAE, because holding company could be one of the qualifying activity. When I say qualifying activity, I say it means it respect to corporate income tax, corporate tax. Um, we have in UAE only two taxes: VAT, value added tax, and the corporate tax. So yes, this is why it could be a very simplified structure. Whatever the investment vehicle it has to be, it could be a UAE holding company, and that how the investment IP rights, contractuals, or the investor rights could be kept into place in the UAE holding company. But yes, being UE, EcoGlow, and EcoGlow USA will have their own taxations in their own countries. Transfer pricing regulations will be applied. We are assuming in that case that Alicia or EcoGlow will be having the logistics being maintained from the UAE, because they are into the logistics supply. They are into the supply of the goods, not the services. Second structure, which could be for Alicia, that she could keep running the EcoGlow UAE and can have its investment company in the USA. So definitely in that case, consolidation will help in the will happen in the UAE. Again, the consolidation will happen, but there are some exemptions which we can claim, basically based on the UAE corporate tax laws, because consolidation will happen in the UAE, but it has already paid tax in the US on the subsidiary income as well, which is 21%. So as per UAE taxation laws, if the subsidiary already has paid taxation more than 9%, which is a UAE tax rate, so then it does not have to pay taxes in the country again. A consolidation will happen in UAE. Dividends will be remitted from USA to UAE. And so definitely we will have the withholding tax implications being remitted from USA to UAE. UAE has no withholding tax yet, so payments can be transferred from UAE to USA when she will be establishing its subsidiary without having taxation. Currently, UAE has announced the withholding tax, but currently 0%. So it means that soon it can increase, but it will be double tax treaty agreements, and we can have a different tax advantages in both countries. Transfer pricing regulations definitely exist here because UAE will be the main logistics framework for Alicia or the EcoGlow. So transfer pricing regulations will exist no matter even if we follow the structure number two, which is company in UAE investing in subsidiary in USA. Third option is something which seems a little bit complicated after having the discussion, but yes, I will have the Abhi and Shantru explaining on that part and how feasible it could be. But yes, this could be one of the structure that UAE mainland company, which is EcoGlow at the moment, that can have a that can be a main distribution company for a branch in USA. So we're not talking about subsidiary, we're talking about extension. But yes, being in foreign company, that will be subject to either they have to consider what is the legal status for the branch in USA for a company, a foreign company, by a foreign company, which is a UAE company. Would it be able to enter into the legal agreements, distribution agreements? Would it be able to have its own employees, staff, so that they can be fully functional to place their products into the USA itself? So based on functionality, we need to see that from legal point of view, but from taxation point of view, if it happens, we understand that USA branch will be subject to 21%. That's for sure from taxation point of view. And then we will have the company reporting the profits again in UAE. And definitely in UAE, again, the same structure will apply, that it will be exempt from taxation because it already has paid taxes on 21%. So that's also a structure which we can have in UAE and USA. The other two structure, the options which I'm going to discuss, that's very interesting. That's basically UAE will consider itself as a distribution company, and they will be residing in a designated zone. So in UAE, we have a free zones, and among the free zones, there are some free zones which are the gated communities, which are declared as designated zones. So two things are there. So first is the first name I use distribution. So distribution is a qualifying activity in UAE as per the recent UAE regulations. So if you're having a distribution activity, you could be subject to qualifying income. When I say qualifying income means that you will be having 0%, you don't have to pay tax on that income. When I say being in designated zone, this is the another condition which EcoGlow has to be maintained, that it is in a distribution activity. The nature of relationship, business relationship, which it has to maintain with the US, that will be distribution agreements. Being in designated zone, so it means that it has to move from the mainland to designated zone, one of the designated zones. And then these two conditions will help it to qualify major chunk of its income as a qualifying income, and she does not has to pay taxation. And through US, it can integrate its activities and pay income on the US, whatever is as per the corp or the LLC, whatever the form it will be forming. So that is the main advantage, which definitely EcoGlow can go ahead, because nature of the business she can have the distribution agreement and she can move to one of the designated zone. The second thing is another option in the same extension of the fourth option, which will be distribution company in a UAE designated zone plus subsidiary in the US. So the first part remains same, distribution activity and being in designated zone. So both conditions qualify her or make her subject to qualify its income, because whatever the structure we form, UAE or USA, both are EcoGlow, but definitely sale purchase transaction has to happen because both are tax jurisdictions now. So in case if one of the entity is in distribution activity, declare itself as a distributor and being in designated zone, so at least at one sale or purchase you can have a 0% tax, which is as per the UAE latest regulations. uh, so that's also one of the thing, the fifth part, that you are a distribution company and you are in designated zone, but you can have a subsidiary in USA okay, that will be having the distribution agreements with the local distributors, with the local retailers, with the local wholesalers, or with the B2C as well, e-commerce or any kind of activity. But when being a distributor, it will sell to its subsidiary in USA. It means that that part of your income, the top line, is gonna be qualified income, and Alicia or EcoGlow can enjoy a 0% corporate tax on that part of the income. Remaining part, definitely whatever will happen from USA to USA business, that will be subject to USA local taxation rates.
All right. Well, thank you, Sidra. Welcome everyone, guys. Appreciate that you invited me today, as well as the Unite family. So we'll look at Alicia. I'll talk a little bit more about payments and then touch base a little bit of obviously also what it's extremely popular when startups, scale ups, or sometimes also established companies coming to the US is looking for the investment. In today's world, if you don't have one of the selling channels that it's online, talking about e-commerce, it's very hard that you are on the map. And people usually then, how do I find you? Where can I buy? And so in this case, let's assume Alicia has the same thing. She has a vertical, e-commerce vertical, and she is going to be selling her products, lighting, see that chandeliers, nightstands, whatever it might be, as long as it's fancy and looks nice, right? Online as well. And so when the e-commerce, so she sets up her website, SEO, everything is working fine. People are pouring on her website. Very just naturally, right? When you come to a point where you conclude the sale, when you conclude the purchase, an invoice is sent. And with the invoice, obviously the payment has been processed. Now she's coming from the UAE, established like Abe and then Shantu and Sidra, right? They mentioned already, like she did the due diligence, and obviously now she has a legal entity in the United States, meaning that now she's collecting payments in the US. That means on the back end, she has a merchant processor, she has her bank, and the merchant processor in between. So actually, when you enter your credit card information on her website, she's able to collect the money from the customer's card, and it goes into her company's account. Now that payment, obviously, now she's global. She has an entity in the UAE, she has an entity in the US, and obviously she's targeting, let's just say, two markets in this case, UAE and US. Obviously it can happen, the international transaction, right? That a person from UAE is buying from her, let's say, US website without even knowing that she might have an entity also in UAE or vice versa. When the invoices and when the payments are processed, right, at that point, depending also where her suppliers are for her chandelier, for her nightstand, it can come that actually you're crossing the country. Let's say that she doesn't have the supplies now in the suppliers in the US, but they are coming from Japan. Let's just say like that, from somewhere completely somewhere else, and so she has to pay them as well. So obviously, traditionally speaking, in all these international transactions, very often a wire transfer used to be a very common thing until the fintech industry kicked in and started pretty much like easing this international financial I'm gonna say like a market. And when you're doing that, right, you are always paying additional fees. And that structured payment then all of a sudden became very expensive for you, because it was like, well, it's not just, I'm not dealing now just paying and now we're looking from Alicia's perspective, where I'm not paying just my supplier, but I'm adding to it like the entire process of transferring the money into a different country. And so the fintech industry, so over this wire transfer image, here actually should be like a very big red cross, because it's not so common anymore. Fintech industry, that's why I mentioned it here, it is become like significantly easier from the perspective, me as a manufacturer, me actually as a store, as a company, and from the other side, also as a user. meaning as a customer in this case, which I'm coming to the Alicia's website. Why? Because here on the right-hand side, you see the payment orchestration platform. These are companies which are merging different payment options around the world on a single platform, which allows me, I'll give you an example. Let's just say in the United States, I have options to pay. Is that Zelle? Is that wire transfer? Is that a credit, debit card? And in different countries might be different options which different generations are using and are popular in those regions. And so payment orchestration platforms are giving the opportunity that you can, on your website, consolidate and offer to your users different payment options, which are known to you. At the same time, fintech on the back end reduces the fees which are associated with paying internationally or globally, which is important also at the end of the day when we are talking. Then comes the last point in a sense of like investments, merger and acquisitions, right? Now you're a global company, you have a legal presence in the United States, and when they're start asking, okay, well, for how much money are you looking for, or you would like to merge with a certain company, right? It will be a buyout, or however actually that merger will happen. Now it start asking you questions. Hey, what are your numbers? And now in that sense, actually now you pull up the financial reports and some other reports which are showing you your numbers and say, look, this is actually what we generated in the United States. This is actually how much money was generated through sales here. That's actually how strong we are. And then globally, if you pull next the UAE component, this is also another site where we were present and we are generating revenue as well. Okay, so now for the investors is that VC, angel investors, whoever might be, the picture becomes clear and they see that you were able, as a business owner, you're able to separate, I'll say like that, your financial flows and actually how they are coming in, and also that you optimize to the maximum of your abilities your payment structure, and meaning that you also reduce the cost associated with every single transaction, and at the same time being so user friendly to your customers that actually you're giving them the opportunities to pay in with options which they prefer the most. Should we move to the next slide, please? Let's move to the, oh yeah, perfect. All right. So doing all that, and Shantanu, Sidra, and Abed, they touch based already. One of the major components when you're dealing with money, it's having in-house a really good CPA. Somebody actually who's going to be, is that Sidra? Is that somebody else? Somebody who's going to be looking over your financial aspect, meaning from the taxation to literally including the bookkeeping. Because at some point, and especially when you're talking about investments or M&A, everyone will go into and dive into direct those numbers and say, how are you good with the money? How are you actually taking care, and are you really a good business owner in that sense, right? So that if somebody you have there pretty much look with a carrot on one side and with a stick on another to kind of like a slap your butt a little bit when it comes down to how are you managing the money? Because at some point that can be extremely, extremely important, especially if you have a growth and you're looking at some point to be like a really well-established, globally recognized brand. So I'll touch base a little bit here. When you have these international transactions, right, you want to avoid or minimize as much as possible, like we said before, with different platforms, the international transactions fees, conversion fees. That's why also having legal entities in different parts of the world, if you are a global company, and then on the back end, you have a legal presence, and on the back end, you have local bank. Consequently, you have a merchant processor, so you can accept the local currency, right? Then you are avoiding then the conversion fees, and like here it's mentioned the FXRs in general. You might hear this sometimes, the expression FXRs, because you collect the money for your merchandise or service you're selling in the local currency. The money goes to a local bank, and you don't have even the international transaction in that case, right? Because but we'll say a must here on the back end is the legal presence, and then obviously your associations with the bank and having the merchant processor there as well. That's why the merchant of record is important. Are you, or are you just sort of like you have some sort of different agreement with your supplier, and they all of a sudden become merchant of record? So they mean they collect the money in full and not you. It is I'll say like that, different. I'm not gonna say what your business models might be, but collecting the money in-house, it's often significantly better because you don't depend. You get the money in hand. You are the owner. You control the situation in that sense. Now, obviously, now we come to that interesting part, which, United States is so, well, going to United States, I want to have an investor. I want to get the money in because I know that my idea and everything will grow, scale, and I'm going to be a second or first Google or Amazon, whatever might be. Well, when it comes down to first is the fundraising, let's touch base a little bit of the fundraising, right? Today, in an essence, I always, when I talk to startups, I say the fundraising part, literally the sky is the limit in a sense of like the ideas how you can get the money in. Traditionally, of course, everyone talks about banks, angel investors, VCs, peer-to-peer sometimes as well, lending clubs, etc. Right? But in all fairness, you might have, depending on your size, you might have different options also to fundraise the money to start. It's not necessarily you go immediately to VC or to angel investor and say, hey, look, I think we are best friends, cut the check, and off we go. It doesn't work that way, right? There is a certain due diligence before. Now, but if you can avoid that, at least at the beginning, you can have a different options where you can get the money from. Are these grants, governmental grants, some other like corporate grants, right? It really depends. You can go crowdfunding, exactly. You can do that as well. You can have auctions. You can have certain events set up where you can attract the money. Is it hard? Absolutely, but it is doable, right? That is one thing which nobody will tell you, oh, don't do that in US. It is just try it. You will see how it goes. Traditionally and always, everyone is, of course, very focused on the angel investor and VCs and lending clubs as well. It's very popular, especially if the interest rates or actually rates which are then to return the money are low. That is easier. Now, the one thing which unfortunately that little picture there on the bottom right corner with the blue background is a little too small, but it shows in which stage the company is, and then where certain let's say investors or entities with money are stepping in, right? The more you're towards the beginning, so towards the left-hand side where you have just the idea, the more is like a family, rich uncles and aunts are getting into the picture. The more you're going to the right, where you have the traction, where you start growing, where you're scaling up, the more you're moving towards VCs, right? Somewhere in between, let's say, are banks and angel investors, right? And angel investors, sometimes they can more together, they come together, right? And say, hey, you know what, the company needs, I don't know, 10 whatever, $1 million. Okay, well, 10 investors goes together. In each of them, let's say, would say in a perfect example, each of them would go 100K, right? And you get that million. But more you go towards the right, the more you're scaling, the more numbers you can show how solid and good you are, the more you're moving towards VCs, right? And VCs obviously today are globally. It's not just the US. They recognized great ideas and great potential around the world. So VCs also from the US have years ago start moving out from the US, and they have their satellite offices and other offices around the world because they are looking for these great ideas and great products, and then they pull you sometimes immediately also into the US market, right? I do see, well, Akshin, I will answer your question. I do see it on chat right after I finish. And so at the end, I'll finish then when you have these cross-border deals, when you have cross-border transactions, say like that. Obviously, in the world we are, sometimes it's a little bit more complex. There are certain also political relationships, or sometimes lack of political and economical relationships between countries. So I would probably suggest you pay attention to that, more on a funny note. But if you have an opportunity to sell something to North Korea, let's not that be the first option, because you might get some phone calls which might not be so pleasant. And right, because these are where we can sell certain things, or certain things cannot be sold. Sometimes it's also like with what entities you are working with, or potentially you can work for. Right, there is an aspect of money laundering on the back end. And I can tell you from my own personal experience, my first company when I came to the US back in 2003, that's exactly what happened. It was one day, two gentlemen knocked on a door. They were from a specific country, said, "Hey, we were interested in your product." The reality was that we were aware of that, that company was under the embargo, and we could not. And so we avoided that. But you can come to in touch with such incidents, or such occurrences can happen. And at that point, just keep that in mind, right? In order to, sometimes, perfect example, contact your lawyer. Talk to your lawyer. Look, this is the business opportunity which is coming up. I'm not sure is that good, is not good. Together, right? Then as a team, you guys talk through it, what would be the best way to proceed to move forward. And Shantanu also, he mentioned one of the things when you are global, and when you are doing business globally, one of the important things is actually the legal jurisdiction, in case you guys don't like each other anymore, right? If something happens and you are not friends anymore, well, and that escalates to a point that actually things do move to court, and actually there is a lawsuit, where will that dispute be resolved? Because imagine that, let's say you sit in the US or UAE, but the court has been, let's say, set up in Japan. So that means immediately you have enormous amount of fees associated with that. On top of that, traveling there at some point for sure, to be there to resolve sometimes a dispute which should not happen in the first place anyway. But these are the things when you start growing internationally. This is a very high 30,000 feet overview, but these are the things, little things, which makes the difference. Then at some point where you wake up one morning and overnight you grow to a point that now, oh, these are all the things I need to pay attention to. And if you haven't done this before, now all of a sudden your days are full of this due diligence which you missed at the beginning. And then instead of focusing on growing your business, now you're dealing with the homework which has not been done beforehand. That's why. Now I'll go back to your question, recommendations on specific banks or payment processors that offer lower FX rates. Okay, so specific banks, first of all, they will ask you when you're looking for the merchant processor, right? They will always ask you in what industry you're in, what is your volume, the transactions, number of transactions, what is your payment methods you're looking for, and then also sometimes actually they will ask you, look, depending on the industry you're in, and depend, because they rank what risk, right? They associate the risk with your industry. They say, well, sometimes they say, look, we can accept you, but just the transaction fee will be extremely high. So explore that before the banks. To get a bank, that's not a problem. The merchant processor, that's actually the question which is more important, right? Now I'll say for the cross-border transactions, you have tons of different companies, but in a sense of, let's say, a very strong, which has a component also of merging different payment options, regionally speaking. A platform, Norber, it's a French company otherwise, but they cover, I think, like around 200. I don't know, like over 100 countries around the world, but around over 250 different payment options as well. That's, for example, one. And the other one from regionally speaking, close to UAE, it's also, which covers the entire continent, for example, Africa. The company's name, Payaza. I think it's Payaza. And they also merge different payment options of the African continent. For example, that would be right now. But again,
Yuri,
that
I'm
is,
sorry, I'm gonna have to
yeah,
cut you off there.
sure.
We're a little over time. I'm sorry to cut you
All
off.
right.
But thank you
That's
so
fine.
much. You've already answered Akshin's question. Just for an overview of what we've went through, guys, I feel like each one of you could have had their own event. There was so much value and so much for someone who's new to the legal world to have learned from there. Just a couple of questions that we've been sent in privately. I'm just going to read them out, and whoever feels like it's their area of expertise, just let me know. So the first question we have is specific to the US, is which states have the most favorable employment laws for startups?
So I can take that. I think that's kind of a two-sided question. So by law in the United States, the law that applies to the employee should be the law in which the state that the employee lives. So most of the time, I don't think anybody actually lives in Delaware. So you don't see employment contracts governed by Delaware law. But like for example, I'm in Illinois. My employment contract will be governed by Illinois law, but I might have a coworker that's in California, and their contract will be governed by California law. There are tricks that you can do, not tricks, but there's ways to structure your agreement, kind of going into what was talked about earlier with respect to governing law and jurisdiction, where even if the law is governed by a specific state, that in the event of a dispute, you'll apply the laws of a different state. But it really depends on where you're hiring from. So California is super employer friendly. Other states are more conservative and they're not. I don't think it should matter with respect to how you hire. I think go out, get the best talent you can get, because your attorney will be able to kind of structure the restrictions in a way that's applicable to the legal standards.
Yeah, I just had an important point to make. It's important to know that Joe Biden lives in Delaware.
I think it's just him. It's population him.
Yeah, I think it's just him. His constituents probably live in California or DC anyway.
Yes.
So thanks for that, Abe. Shantanu, actually, next question for you. You mentioned that the US specifically was a very litigious country. The question comes in is, what proactive measures can we take to prevent disputes specifically with IP and sort of avoid that litigation in the US market?
Well, hire a lawyer. That's it for me, folks.
Hire Shantanu.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
May I just
Hire a lawyer.
ask
Honestly,
one more
it's
thing? Oh, go
I
ahead.
mean, the most important thing to keep in mind is that you need legal advice when it comes to IP. IP is not the sort of thing you can just wing. I've seen people trying to wing it. You can't wing IP. So if you want to avoid disputes, guess what? Find the money from someplace and hire a lawyer.
Okay. Lastly, the question comes probably, Sidar, you can take this. If there are any startup tax credits or incentives for businesses that come, either from the Middle East or as a startup or in specific industries that are relevant, especially on Ignite, like AI, fintech, blockchain.
Yes, yes, definitely. There are the number of the tax credits which are available. But for Middle East side, if I talk specifically about UAE, so not specifically on AI, Web3, digital assets space, but this is for the small businesses. So there is some limitation that up to 1 million, there could be some small business relief which are available, and they could extend the small business reliefs as well. I mean, they can make it 6 million, 10 million as well. There are some active discussions going on. When it comes to USA tax credits will be available, especially when it comes to clean energy products. So she could have some research and development expenditures exemptions available in USA and in similar to in UAE as well. But there is no specific tax exemptions available in US and UAE, both based on AI, fintech, and Web3 space.
Okay. Well, if that's it for the questions, thank you so much for, first of all the panelists, Abe, Shantanu, Yuri, and Sidra. You guys are amazing. And if anyone has anything, wants to learn more, or has any issues that they'd like to ask them about specifically, you're more than welcome to book one-on-one mentorship sessions. As for the future for Ignite events, we have an event coming up tomorrow actually with Antler. It's in the AWS room at DIFC Innovation 1. So if you're interested in attending, we'd be more than happy to host you. And then we are looking at exhibiting next week at Step Dubai. So if you're attending, again, please stop by the Ignite booth. Once again, thank you to all the panelists. Thank you to all the attendees for watching. And please keep an eye out for more Ignite events. We'd love to have you in the community.
Thank you, guys.
Bye,
Thank
guys.
you.
Bye,
Bye,
guys.
everyone.
Thank you very much. Good night
Thanks,
for having us.
everyone. Bye,
Thank you.
Sidra.
Hi,
Bye,
Judy.
Yuri.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye, Abby.